No one noticed her for a decade. Until her old photo changed everything for working mums. 10 years passed and no one ever truly saw her. The Hobart morning was crisp with that particular Tasmanian bite that cuts through wool jumpers and settles deep in your bones. Through the rain-streaked windows of the third-floor insurance office on Collins Street, Mount Wellington loomed grey and imposing, its peak shrouded in the kind of mist that promised a long, cold day ahead. MIA Evans sat in the back row at every office meeting, her voice lost under the hum of louder, sharper ambitions, always present, always prepared, but somehow always invisible in the chorus of colleagues who knew exactly how to make themselves heard. On her desk, tucked between a small pot of native violets and a stack of meticulously organized client files, sat a dusty, framed photo of a younger MIA holding her newborn daughter. The glass had accumulated fingerprints and the occasional coffee ring over the years, but the image remained clear. A radiant woman with tired eyes and an enormous smile, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in a hand-knitted yellow blanket. She'd almost forgotten the girl in that picture, the one who'd believed she could conquer the world while raising a child alone, until the day everything quietly changed. MIA was the one who always volunteered for overtime, but never for recognition, the colleague who remembered everyone's coffee order during busy periods, and who could be counted on to stay back when deadlines loomed like storm clouds over the office landscape. In the busy Hobart insurance office, a cramped space that smelled perpetually of instant coffee and the lavender hand cream their receptionist, Dot, applied religiously every hour, she wore simple cardigans in muted colors, packed homemade lunches in containers that had seen better decades, and listened with genuine empathy as others shared their weekend adventures, relationship dramas, and family celebrations. Behind her gentle smile, she carried the weight of solo motherhood like a backpack that never came off, juggling childcare pick-up times with client meetings, school holidays with project deadlines, and the kind of invisible exhaustion that seeps into your bones when you're the only adult responsible for another human being's entire world. She never complained, never asked for help beyond the occasional, "Would it be possible if I?" followed by careful explanations about childcare arrangements or doctor's appointments. Her colleagues knew her daughter's name, Sophie, now 9 years old, with her mother's quiet determination and her absent father's stubborn cowlick, but they saw MIA's motherhood as something that happened outside office hours, separate from the professional person who processed claims and attended meetings with clockwork reliability. Her strengths were quiet, woven into small acts that held the office together like invisible thread, organizing the annual charity bake sale that raised funds for the local women's shelter, remembering colleagues' birthdays with handwritten cards and homemade slices, staying late to help overwhelmed teammates finish their reports, and maintaining the kind of institutional memory that kept operations running smoothly when systems failed or new employees needed guidance. MIA's desk faced away from the harbour views that the senior staff enjoyed, but she'd positioned her monitor so she could glimpse the old sandstone buildings of Battery Point through a narrow slice of window. During quiet moments, she'd watch tourists wandering between the historic cottages and galleries, imagining lives less constrained by the careful balance of work and single motherhood. Her lunch breaks were usually spent in the small park across the street, sharing a sandwich with the office pigeons while reading library books or responding to text messages from Sophie's school about upcoming excursions or forgotten homework. Other colleagues went to cafes or shops, but MIA's budget didn't stretch to daily cafe visits, and her time was measured in precise increments that accounted for school pickup, grocery shopping, and the 100 small tasks that keep a household of two functioning. The years had settled into a rhythm that felt both sustainable and suffocating. MIA was good at her job, excellent, really, with a talent for understanding complex policies and a gentle way of explaining coverage details to stressed clients who'd just experienced house fires, car accidents, or medical emergencies. She'd built relationships with regular clients who specifically requested her assistance, trusting her thorough approach and compassionate communication style. But when performance reviews came around, when promotions were discussed, when opportunities for professional development arose, somehow MIA's contributions became background noise, overshadowed by colleagues who spoke louder, networked more aggressively, or simply fit the unspoken template of what leadership looked like in their particular corner of corporate Australia. She'd applied for senior positions 3 times over the past 5 years, each application meticulously prepared with documentation of her achievements, client testimonials, and carefully crafted responses to selection criteria. Each time, she'd made it to the interview stage, sitting across from panels who praised her dedication and experience before ultimately selecting candidates who were more dynamic, better suited to lead change, or possessed that indefinable quality of executive presence that seemed to correlate strongly with being male, childless, or simply louder than MIA had ever learned to be. But when a new manager arrived, Brett Hutchinson, transferred from the Melbourne office with a reputation for shaking things up and maximizing efficiency, things shifted like tectonic plates beneath the familiar landscape of MIA's working life. Brett was 42, divorced, and driven by metrics that reduced human complexity to spreadsheet entries. He'd survived 3 corporate restructures by positioning himself as indispensable, and he approached his new role in Hobart with the evangelical fervor of someone determined to prove his worth through other people's productivity. Within his first month, Brett had implemented new systems for tracking time, monitoring productivity, and optimizing human resources. Suddenly, the little flexibility MIA depended on, leaving 10 minutes early twice a week to collect Sophie from after-school care, working from home when her daughter was sick with the inevitable winter bugs that circulated through Hobart primary schools, taking extended lunch breaks for parent-teacher conferences, was questioned, documented, and presented as evidence of insufficient commitment to excellence. The support she'd quietly built over years, colleagues who'd cover her phone calls during school emergencies, supervisors who understood that her consistent high-quality work mattered more than her physical presence during every minute of business hours, disappeared under Brett's systematic approach to professional accountability. MIA found herself documenting every deviation from standard hours, justifying routine accommodations that had previously been granted without question, and feeling increasingly isolated as colleagues avoided being associated with her special treatment under the new regime's zero-tolerance approach to flexibility. The breaking point came on a Thursday in late June, when Sophie developed a fever at school and needed to be collected immediately. MIA had already used her allocated sick leave for her daughter's earlier bout with gastro, and Brett's response to her request to leave early was delivered with the cold precision of corporate policy: personal issues cannot continue to impact professional obligations. This pattern of absence is unacceptable. Standing in the office while her sick child waited at school, MIA felt something crack inside her chest, not dramatically, but like a hairline fracture in glass that you know will eventually spread until the whole structure fails. She collected Sophie, spent 3 days nursing her daughter through a particularly nasty flu, and returned to work to find a formal written warning on her desk, citing excessive personal leave and failure to prioritize professional commitments. The document, printed on company letterhead and signed with Brett's aggressive scrawl, felt like a slap delivered in bureaucratic language. One Friday in July, when the Hobart winter had settled into its rhythm of grey skies and biting winds that made the short walk from the office to the car park feel like an Arctic expedition, MIA arrived at work to find her desk cleared for someone more dynamic. Her personal items had been packed into a cardboard box that sat beside her empty chair like a monument to expendability. The pot of native violets, the small collection of pens she'd accumulated over the years, her emergency stash of muesli bars for busy days when lunch breaks disappeared, all of it reduced to objects in a box that could be carried in one trip to the car park. The photo of her and her daughter was the only thing left behind, standing alone on the empty desk like a forgotten memorial. Brett's explanation was delivered with the casual efficiency of someone who'd had this conversation before. We need team members who can fully commit to our evolving workplace culture. Your circumstances make that challenging, and we feel it's best for everyone to make a change. No mention of her 10 years of dedication, her extensive client relationships, or her track record of excellent performance. No acknowledgement of the countless hours she'd contributed beyond her contracted obligations, the initiatives she'd launched, or the colleagues she'd mentored. Just a clinical assessment that her life circumstances made her incompatible with their vision of professional excellence. MIA took her photo home, placing it on her kitchen table as she tried to find work again, the image now serving as both comfort and reminder of the person she'd been before the slow erosion of confidence that comes from being systematically undervalued. Each day, she searched for jobs on websites that seemed designed to discourage rather than welcome applications, sent carefully crafted cover letters into digital voids that rarely responded, and walked Sophie to school under the grey Tasmanian sky that seemed to reflect her own internal weather. The Hobart job market for experienced insurance professionals was limited, and most positions either required flexibility she couldn't provide or offered conditions that would barely cover childcare costs. She found herself applying for roles that represented steps backward in her career, positions that would pay less than she'd earned 5 years earlier, jobs that seemed designed for people whose lives weren't complicated by the realities of single parenthood. Between applications and interviews that led nowhere, MIA threw herself into the unpaid work that had always sustained her sense of purpose. She baked Anzac biscuits for the school fete, volunteered at the canteen, where she learned about her fellow parents' struggles with work-life balance, and helped elderly neighbors with grocery shopping and small repairs that accumulated when you live alone. These small actions went mostly unseen, appreciated by their immediate recipients, but invisible to the broader world that seemed to measure worth in job titles, salary figures, and LinkedIn endorsements. The winter months stretched into spring, and MIA found herself caught between determination and despair. She'd managed to secure some part-time bookkeeping work for local small businesses, a cafe in Sandy Bay, a craft shop in Battery Point, a physiotherapy practice that needed someone reliable to manage their invoicing. But the irregular income and lack of benefits created a constant undercurrent of financial anxiety. Sophie, with the resilience of children who adapt to circumstances they don't fully understand, never complained about the changes in their lifestyle. Fewer takeaway dinners, more trips to the library instead of the cinema, birthday presents that came from op shops rather than department stores. She seemed to understand, with the intuitive wisdom of 9-year-olds, that her mother was fighting battles that couldn't be fully explained or shared. One afternoon in early October, when the Southern Hemisphere spring was finally asserting itself with longer days and the first tentative appearance of daffodils in their small garden, Sophie was helping MIA sort through old papers and documents, creating piles for recycling and filing. Sophie picked up the framed photo from the kitchen table, studying it with the serious concentration she applied to difficult homework problems. "Mum, who's that strong lady?" she asked, tracing the glass with her finger. The question stopped MIA completely. She looked at her daughter, then at the photo, seeing it through fresh eyes. The woman in the image did look strong, tired but radiant, overwhelmed but determined, cradling her newborn with the fierce protectiveness of someone who knows exactly what matters most in the world. That question awakened something in MIA she'd buried under years of quiet accommodation and careful self-diminishment, her courage and quiet pride, the belief that she was capable of more than the sum of other people's limitations on her potential. "That's me, love," MIA said quietly. "That's me when you were born, when I knew I could do anything because I had you to do it for." Sophie studied the photo more carefully, then looked at her mother with the direct honesty that children use when they are trying to understand something important. "You still look strong, Mum. But sadder." "Why sadder?" The conversation that followed lasted well into the evening, with MIA finding herself explaining things she'd never put into words before. About how sometimes the world doesn't see people clearly. About how being a good mother and a capable professional can be treated as contradictory rather than complementary. About how systems designed by one type of person don't always accommodate the reality of everyone else's lives. Sophie listened with the intense focus she usually reserved for David Attenborough documentaries, asking questions that revealed her understanding was deeper than MIA had realized. "So you lost your job because you love me?" Sophie asked. "I lost my job because some people think loving you makes me less good at other things," MIA corrected gently. "But they are wrong about that." "How do we show them they are wrong?" It was a child's question with an adult's complexity, and it lodged in MIA's mind like a seed that needed time to germinate. Encouraged by her daughter's faith in her strength, MIA found herself thinking differently about her story. Instead of seeing her experience as a series of personal failures or unfortunate circumstances, she began to recognize it as part of a larger pattern that affected thousands of Australian women navigating the intersection of career ambitions and family responsibilities. The decision to write about her journey came gradually, like dawn breaking over Mount Wellington, slow at first, then suddenly illuminating everything. She started with small observations shared on a local mothers' Facebook group, then expanded into longer reflections about the invisible barriers that keep capable women from reaching their potential. Her writing wasn't angry or accusatory, it was observational, thoughtful, and grounded in the specific details of lived experience. She wrote about the impossible mathematics of childcare costs versus part-time wages, about performance reviews that penalized flexibility without acknowledging reliability, about the cumulative impact of small exclusions and casual dismissals that collectively create insurmountable obstacles. The post that changed everything was written on a Sunday evening in November, after Sophie had gone to bed and MIA was sitting at their small kitchen table with a cup of tea and the framed photo propped against a stack of bills. She wrote about her decade in the insurance office, about the photo that had witnessed her gradual disappearance, about the question her daughter had asked that made her see herself clearly again. She attached the old photo to the post, the image of a younger MIA holding newborn Sophie, both of them glowing with the particular light that comes from beginning something important together. 10 years ago, I thought I could have it all, she wrote. I was wrong about that, but not in the way I expected. I couldn't have it all because systems designed for one type of life don't accommodate the beautiful complexity of others. But maybe that's changing. Maybe it has to change. The post struck a nerve across Australia like lightning hitting a power grid, illuminating connections that had been invisible in isolation. Within hours, thousands of Australian mothers were sharing and commenting, their own stories echoing MIA's with variations that revealed the scope of the challenge. Women from Perth to Brisbane, from Darwin to Melbourne, sharing experiences of being overlooked, undervalued, or pushed out of careers because their lives didn't fit neat corporate templates. The comment section became a virtual support group and policy forum combined. Mothers shared strategies for surviving hostile workplace cultures, successful negotiations for flexible arrangements, and resources for career transitions. But they also shared anger, frustration, and grief for opportunities lost and potential squandered by systems that couldn't see past traditional definitions of professional commitment. Local media picked up the story first. The Mercury ran a feature about MIA's experience and its resonance with Tasmanian working mothers. Then national outlets followed, recognizing in her story a larger narrative about workforce participation, gender equality, and the economic cost of excluding capable people because their lives don't conform to outdated professional norms. MIA found herself invited to speak at community events, her experience inspiring conversations about new flexible work initiatives in Hobart offices and beyond. She spoke to chambers of commerce about the business case for inclusive employment practices, to government committees reviewing workplace legislation, to university students studying the future of work in an economy that couldn't afford to waste human potential. But the most meaningful invitations came from other mothers, groups meeting in community centers and libraries, informal networks of women supporting each other through career transitions and family challenges. These conversations felt like coming home after a long journey through foreign territory. The photo that had sat on her office desk for 10 years, accumulating dust and symbolizing her gradual invisibility, became the centerpiece of presentations about seeing people clearly, recognizing different types of strength, and creating workplaces that worked for everyone. MIA kept the photo on her bedside table now, not as a relic of who she used to be, but as a symbol of quiet resilience that had sustained her through the darkest period of professional rejection and personal doubt. The work that emerged from her experience was different from anything she'd imagined during those years of processing insurance claims and attending meetings where her voice was lost in louder conversations. She became a consultant helping organizations develop genuinely inclusive policies, a writer whose articles about work-life integration reached audiences across Australia and beyond, and an advocate for systemic changes that would benefit not just working mothers, but anyone whose life circumstances challenge traditional employment models. The financial uncertainty that had defined her months of unemployment gradually gave way to a different kind of professional life, one built around her values rather than despite them, one that recognized her expertise in navigating complex challenges rather than penalizing her for having them. Sophie, now 10 and wise beyond her years, often asked about the photo and the story it represented. She understood, with the clarity that comes from witnessing transformation firsthand, that her mother hadn't just found new work, she'd found her voice. She never raised her voice in anger or demanded recognition through dramatic gestures, but her story reached further than she ever imagined, became how MIA thought about her unexpected journey from invisible employee to visible advocate. The quiet strength that had sustained her through years of being overlooked had become the foundation for work that made other people feel seen, valued, and possible. Sometimes the most profound changes begin not with grand declarations, but with simple questions asked by children who haven't yet learned that some things are supposed to be impossible. Sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted leads you to discover everything you didn't know you needed. Sometimes the voices that go unheard for years are exactly the ones the world most needs to listen to. Do you think the quietest voices can create the biggest changes? Or do they simply know something about strength that louder voices haven't learned yet?